Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by my co-host John Harris. As always, we are back to share our thoughts and reactions to a wonderful, wacky Week 14 of the NFL season, of 2023-2024 NFL season. And yeah, it was... Before we dive into it, I mean, I'll just say this, quite a good weekend for you, John. I mean, obviously, your Cowboys won. Yeah. We'll talk about that. But even, some things went your way in fantasy, too, if I remember correctly.
Well, they almost did.
Okay.
I came real close, but, I mean, do you want to talk about that right now, the fantasy thing?
Yeah, we can go ahead. I mean, explain
it. Basically, I was in a scenario where in the same league in which I won the Survivor Series, first off, just in terms of my matchup, it was I narrowly won. Justin Herbert was in my lineup, got me 1.8 points, so that could have been terrible. But shout out David Njoku because the guy got me 27 and kind of saved my week because I only ended up winning by 6 points. So things could have got really bad there. But apart from that, I was in a scenario where I needed you and Mitch to both go 0-2, and I needed to go 2-0. And then I would win the tiebreaker between us three based on points 4, and I would get the bye week. Now, you did go 0-2. I did go 2-0. The only issue is that Mitch did go 2-0, which is why I said some things went my way. I almost got there. His opponent, the reason I said I almost got there, his opponent ended up losing to him by 0.1 points. So his opponent almost beat him, but I said 2-0 because we also play the median. And the unfortunate part is that even if his opponent actually outscores him, I still would have needed my opponent to score another point because he is 1.02 points behind Mitch. So he would have needed more than that. And then and that was on Saquon, who was his last player. And then I would have needed another person in the league, your opponent, Bird, to also score. He would have needed 11 points. So I wasn't really that close. Like the fact that it came that close, though, that two people were literally within a point, basically a point away from passing him, including his opponent making him lose, and that Bird being within 10, it was within reach, basically. But unfortunately, I didn't get there. Cordell Patterson, Jalen Hurts, that's what messed up Bird. Yeah, it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but I almost got the bye. I didn't. You also, unfortunately, did not get the bye because of the 0-2.
Yeah.
So Mitch gets it, and I'm now the 3rd seed, which means I play Cody, and you play Alex. And I honestly don't know which matchup is easier. So
yeah, well, it's tough for me because I have CJ Stroud in that league. So
that is tough, very tough.
Yeah, I will be eyeing concussion protocol very closely.
I mean, obviously, he'll be back, but this was a tough week for both of us in that regard because Herbert went down. Luckily, I do have Kyler Murray as my 3rd quarterback and Dak as my 2nd. So I have like good replacements, but Herbert going to IR kind of sucks too. So tough week for our quarterbacks, honestly.
Yeah, and then you're dominating in my dynasty league, and I have Herbert in my dynasty league, a separate one from this one, and I was already packing the tents and looking towards March, and now that Herbert's gone, I definitely am doing so. So
I'm still just so worried in that league that for anyone who knows, I'm 13-1. I have almost 200 points more than the next highest scoring team. I have almost 200 points less than the next most points or least points against team. So like I'm not only scoring a ton, but nobody's scoring against me, and I'm 13-1. And yet I am still so convinced I'm just going to have the worst week ever, the first week of the playoffs, and get eliminated.
Yeah, it would be wild if our friend Saquon wins again somehow, because I technically still have... I know I've told him that I'm going to probably do it after my paycheck this week, because I had car issues last week. So if you're listening, Saquon, here's your update. It's mailing out after the paycheck hits. I found a box that fits and everything, because I got to put packaging in.
You're mailing it to him?
Yeah, so if he wins, it would be a
No,
convenient.
no. Don't mail it. We're so close to the end of the year. You might as well just not do it.
No, because he needs he gets time with it, and then just he'll have to send it back. Maybe September ish. Because I think I forget the timeline, but timelines are messy. That's been my fault. So, but hopefully you can bring it back to Texas. If not, I would want at least Squam to win it because I don't want to send it to it's what Bird and Dade, so it's Alabama, and I don't know where Bird lives, so I'm not gonna out
He
that.
lives in Tennessee.
So great, gotta send it off to a different state. But nonetheless, enough fantasy talk as it was going. Like I said, it was Julie John's weekend. For the most part, you almost came close to getting everything you want. At least you made the playoffs, like you mentioned.
If I got that perfect scenario where I got the bye, dude, this would be the luckiest fantasy season I've ever had. Not only that happening, but then in your league, like I know my team is scoring a ton, but the points against in that league is still kind of shocking to me. How like it feels like every week my opponent puts up like 90 and I'm scoring like 140.
Hey, sometimes that's the way the dice fall for you, I guess. But anyway, let's get into week 14 because it was quite an interesting week, as always, with the NFL. And, we probably should have known that Thursday was going to set the tone, oddly, as the Thursday night game, if people remember, because it was quite forgettable, especially after the first half. It was the Patriots facing the Steelers. Patriots won this one, and gosh, they scored 21 points in the first half. That's all they needed. They didn't score any in the second half. Their offense, went back to its usual form, it seems like. But they beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh to win 21-18. There's much hullabaloo about, Mike Tomlin. I know it's near it, but, oh man, they lost, 2 straight games to 2-10 opponents. But nonetheless, John, your thoughts, if any, in regards to the Thursday night game?
I mean, I thought the Patriots were gonna lose. I thought this game was gonna be pretty gross. Patriots offense actually came out and was able to get some stuff done. Zeke, I mean, he had a great week. He wasn't super efficient on the ground, but 7 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown is nothing to scoff at. So he was doing work. And I love Zeke, so I love to see that. I still wish that he was still in Dallas. But I mean, he did well. Bailey Zappi did well. We had some Juju Smith-Schuster sightings. So overall, I mean, the Patriots kind of surprised me because this is the same team that literally put up 0 points against the Chargers defense, and then somehow against the Steelers are able to score 21. How does it work like that? I could not tell you. So I don't know. I have no explanations on this game because it did not go the way I saw coming at all. I thought the Steelers might get back in it because all of a sudden the second half, the Patriots went cold. Punts are being blocked. Like crazy stuff is happening. But nope, they held on.
Yeah, it's just, I think important factor is we've mentioned it in regards to, it feels like the Steelers' form of what's gotten them to this point is that they, at least their offense doesn't turn the ball over, but we saw very early Mitch Trubisky interception, which led to a very quick, easy touchdown for the Patriots after their great opening drive. So, I mean, you're already helping a team get more confidence. And then now Pittsburgh has to all of a sudden play from behind, which we know that, they usually don't want to, especially with your backup quarterback. And then, like we've seen their passing game, if anything, there's been their run game recently that's been kind of helping the offense and been the star of the offense. But they weren't able to do so because kind of just another thing that's felt like kind of flown over the radar, under the radar, excuse me, for the Patriots. It's all that's been going on is, I mean, their defense at least still has been really good the past few weeks. Like all those crazy stats about they've held teams to, was it 6 points or 7 points for 2 straight weeks, and yet they still, couldn't score. So finally, it seems like the offense finally held there in the bargain. Granted, once again, helped a little bit by the defense / Pittsburgh's poor offense. So it was just not too shocking because Pittsburgh's a middling team. So once again, I don't know if I was just a little bit too plugged in or I was accidentally got into that. The algorithm threw me all those the haters because I was already seeing Mike Tomlin overrated, this and that. Like, come on, like we know what the Steelers were before going into the season. Let's not they were 7-5 going into this game, but let's not act like we had them as Super Bowl contenders. Like we expect them to be a scrappy team, and this happens sometimes. You're gonna drop games that you maybe should have won. So
Yeah, just random. I do find it funny that like honestly, there's so many fan bases that like just want their coach fired, and it doesn't like the only fan bases that I feel like have no thought about that at all are like any team that has won a Super Bowl like recently. Basically, it's kind of like it, and I'm talking like the Chiefs, the Rams, like these kind of teams, right? Who are like super recent winners, to where like a lot of like I mean even I don't feel like this is the consensus fan base opinion, but I've all of a sudden started to see like people talking about Nick Sirianni, right? And like they went to the Super Bowl last year. They're sitting atop like the NFC East still. Even I mean, sure they lost 2 straight games, and all of a sudden some people are questioning it. Once again, it's not a consensus opinion, but I just find it funny that like I remember last year after the Niners lost, like there was a lot of 49ers fans like Kyle Shanahan's never going to get it done. He's a choke artist, all this kind of stuff. Steelers fans like occasionally get all up in arms about Tomlin, even though he always goes 500 or better. It just kind of blows my mind how some of these fans like have coaches who are, man, could you imagine what like Cleveland Browns fans would have done for a coach that could go 500 or better for that long, right? Like some of these teams that are just miserable. So anyway, just a random aside that I find funny about some fan bases.
yeah,
And my fan base is not like innocent either.
Yes.
Well, the Cowboys like we'll make the playoffs and then we'll lose in the divisional round, which obviously the Cowboys, they lose a lot. Like my entire life, we've never gotten past that. But like the answer always, we got to fire the coach. We got to fire the coach. So
or blame it on the quarterback. It's all his fault. It's all Tony Romo or now Dak Prescott. It's all his fault, even though he had a freaking great game and made one mistake, like like or something of that sort. So regardless, I guess good win for the Patriots. Well, maybe not so in regards to draft standings, but hey, maybe a pride win for Bill Belichick. Maybe we still got to see if they actually do pull the trigger, either side, either Bill or Patriots front office in regards to moving on or maybe continuing forward. Who knows? But nonetheless, they get the Bill Belichick and the Patriots get the win there over the Steelers on Thursday night. So let's move on over to the Sunday games, starting with what was surprisingly a very good game and coming from a surprising person, although maybe with his previous resume you wouldn't be so surprised, as it is the Joe Flacco and the Browns getting the big win over the Jaguars, 31-27. Trevor Lawrence did play. He did manage to tough it out, but it was the Browns that came out on top here. What were your thoughts, John, in regards to the Browns just getting it done?
I mean, good win for Cleveland, right? Because we're talking about the Steelers and the position they're potentially in to make the playoff run. They're starting to kind of drop it a little bit to where Cleveland's holding on. They're 8-5. Jacksonville is no slouch. I know that Lawrence is dealing with the injury, and I know that he had a bad game. But in general, they held off the potential comeback that Jacksonville might have had at the end. They were consistent all the way through. Joe Flacco has been solid. And he's starting to build even more rapport with their weapons. I already mentioned what David Njoku was able to do, but Amari Cooper had a great day as well. So, yeah, I mean, this was a great day from the Cleveland Browns. Their defense, it's interesting because, they did allow Lawrence to throw 3 touchdowns. They did allow Etienne to get in the end zone. So, like, they allowed a lot of points, but they found ways to win in the ways they could, right? If they're moving the ball, if they're having efficiency in that regard, well, then just start getting some takeaways, right? We talk about some of those kinds of defenses in past years, and I think that Cleveland is definitely better than that. But even the best defenses might have a game like this where the other team is finding ways to get down the field, and if that's the case, then the great defenses step up and they make plays and they get the ball back for their offense when they need to, and that's what Cleveland did here. So, yeah, I mean, it does kind of suck that for the Browns, we're not going to be seeing them potentially go into the playoffs with their true starting quarterback, or even specifically Nick Chubb, because of the machine that he is for this offense. But man, this Cleveland team is very talented. And speaking of coaches, you got to give a lot of credit to Kevin Stefanski because they've been balling out this year.
Yeah, despite their 4th quarterback, fourth starter this season.
Yeah.
On top of that, you mentioned all that the carousel of other injuries. And then, remember there's a whole David Njoku. He, had some kind of house accident, a couple. So like there's also that. And then dealing with a lot of stuff. But yeah, so it felt like typically the old Browns definitely would have, folded, and from when we grew up. And no, this is, like you mentioned, definitely a different Cleveland team, because despite all that, they're still competing with a very good Jacksonville team. Like Lawrence, you mentioned, wasn't great, but hey, he still threw the ball. You saw him make plays, but have some mistakes, and it's a very good Cleveland team. We mentioned the defense, how good they are too, and obviously, yeah, it was kind of a feast or famine kind of day for them, and obviously they just in regards to the turnovers too, it felt like, and I'm just looking at especially drive wise, Cleveland definitely capitalized more just on whenever they did. They generated a turnover from Jacksonville, while Jacksonville I think I'm seeing once off a fumble did they convert off a Cleveland touchdown. That was because Cleveland fumbled it and Jacksonville had to go 12 yards. So yeah, that definitely helps. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see going forward if this solid attack from Cleveland is sustainable. Because yeah, I mean, especially if you had told me the first 2 weeks, hey, first 2 weeks Joe Flacco's coming back from basically his couch, and he's gonna be thrown to the Browns. They're also gonna lose their right tackle, their second right tackle, because Conklin was knocked out earlier in the year. Now their rookie was playing well and he got knocked out. And also, missing the running back, so he's gonna have to throw 40 plus times, but yet he's still gonna have 5 touchdowns and just be relatively effective. I would have been shocked. So yeah, credit to Flacco for the quick adjustments, but like you mentioned, it does help that we're seeing that some of the rest of the roster is stepping up, filling out, showing out. Grant Delpit, he's been playing really well. He got an extension, I think, a day or two ago, so kudos to him. And then one of the guys I liked in the draft, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, he's been really good this year. Finally kind of healthy, and obviously another year in the system has helped as he's really sparked on the field as well for that Cleveland defense. And yeah, I mean, we'll keep saying it, but the AFC is going to be wide open, and the Browns are definitely staying in that conversation. So we'll see if they can do so. And tough loss for Jaguars. We mentioned, their division's kind of still up for grabs, and definitely so after this loss. So we'll see if they can stay atop that, or they'll get dragged down into the wild card race, and obviously how that Trevor Lawrence injury may affect them going forward. So Browns get the big win at home. Another team that got the win at home, this and in surprising fashion, was the Chicago Bears, as the Bears beat the Lions. They almost did it 2 weeks ago. They finished the deal this time at home, beating the Lions 28-13. What were your thoughts here, John, in regards to the Bears, getting the upset?
I'm kind of disappointed in Detroit, because I mean, you saw it when we did our picks. Like, I specifically said, man, I expect Detroit to bounce back. I think that the last time they played against this Chicago Bears team, that, yeah, sure, it was a struggle, but I think maybe it was potentially a fluke. I said a lot of things, and I really feel like this game was it just proved everything I said wrong. And I'm not disappointed because of that. I'm disappointed because the Lions are starting to fall apart, honestly. Like, this is a bad team that they should be beating. This is a team that just the talent difference between these two rosters is insane. And yet the Lions are completely falling apart, not once, but twice. They needed a miracle to win the first time. And then Justin Fields and co go out there and they beat him again. And not again, but they finished their business after, what happened the last time they played. And so, man, like, the Lions, they got to do some soul searching, because it felt like early on that this was the year that they finally kind of break out of the reputation that they've always kind of had of being a pretty miserable franchise. And yet here we are sitting here. I mean, they're 9-4, and you don't want to complain about that. But if the Chicago Bears can give you this many issues, you can only imagine what Philadelphia, Dallas, San Francisco, heck, maybe even some of these other teams that you might have to play in a potential wild card matchup in that first round, like a Seattle, or who knows? I don't know. I feel like Detroit has really kind of fallen apart, and I don't know where they go from here.
Yeah, I think we're starting to, like, some of the concerns that we had, or at least I had beginning of the year, are starting to kind of come to light. very concerned about their secondary, and we're starting to feels like teams. I mean, DJ Moore had a good game, and so did Cole Kmet, and so they found their opportunities there. And we saw in the Packer game too, like a few explosive plays, especially down the field, can be had against the Lions. And we at the beginning of the season seemed like the whole defense was stepping up, but maybe as time has gone on, it just feels like they've all kind of reverted back to the mean. And once again, like my concern going this year is, okay, you have Aiden Hutchinson, he's great, but who else on defense is going to make plays? And we're starting to see like not many other, we saw early in the year some guys make some plays, but now it's becoming less and less. And hey, they're still a young team. I think that's important to note. So especially the defense. So you can see that there. And then on the flip side, on offense, I mean, lack of a second weapon. I mean, there's still Jameson Williams not involved really at all in this game. I know he had one carry for 4 yards and only one target. So that's a concern because the Bears were able to just completely shut down Amon-Ra St. Brown. And it seems like once you do that, like we saw, like no one else really had much of an impact in regards to the passing game. Jared Goff looked relatively human and normal, back to kind of what we saw in regards to the end in LA. Well, obviously it wasn't as bad, but in regards to the passing game, you see that okay, he's good, but he needs special around him to for it to be great. And it just wasn't their day in the office. Had the bad botch snap. Not sure if that's really on Goff or the center, but regardless, miscues, things like that. Like you mentioned, kind of killed the Lions here, and then this time they couldn't get away with it as the Bears were just better overall in the day, especially in regards to taking care of the ball late. So good win for the Bears, good confidence win, especially spoiling the Lions, and it may definitely puts the Lions behind the 8 ball, especially talk about later because they were in very solid position to stay in the running for the 1 seed. But now you mentioned 9-4, kind of on the outside looking in, and they kind of have their tough stretch coming up. As they have the Broncos, who we know are no slouch. Okay, Vikings, but then made divisional game, who knows? Then your Cowboys in Dallas too, and that's one of those things where like, ooh, okay, equally talented team. Can you keep up with them on both sides of the ball? We'll have to see. But obviously, I get through Denver too, and like I mentioned, that's not going to be an easy one. So Lions definitely going to be kind of put through a little bit of the test here next few weeks to see if they can bounce back and continue to display that dominance that they showed earlier in the season. But Bears get the big win. Moving on, let's go to the lovely NFC South, where this was a huge game for the implications, and it actually was a good one as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get the win, causing more chaos, ensuing more of confusion and less clarity in the division, of course. They get the win 29-25 over the Falcons. Such an NFC South score, too. But nonetheless, John, what were your thoughts here?
Well, when we did our picks, I had this whole thing about the NFC South and how like the Panthers were going to win and then the Buccaneers were going to win and then we were going to have this like potential 3-way tie and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, Tampa held up their end of the bargain, but the Saints did get the dub over in Carolina, which actually I think that's what the Saints needed. Yes. I don't know whatever I was going to that at the beginning, but I remember I did pick the Panthers. We'll get to that game later. Tampa did their thing. I mean, good for Tampa. Talking about a team that finds ways to win. Tampa's offense is very interesting to me because they're like the polar opposite of Atlanta. They lean so heavily on their playmakers, it's absurd. Now, obviously, Mike Evans didn't have much of an impact in this one, but Chris Godwin did. That's the one kind of unfortunate aspect of their offense so far, is Baker seems largely incapable of getting both receivers involved at the same time. It's either a Mike Evans week, which is a majority of weeks, or it's a Chris Godwin week, which has happened like 3 times. But Rachaad White has really emerged. He's showing off that he can be a very versatile weapon, both on the ground and through the air. You got Cade Otton emerging too. So this is, I think, a really fun... I don't want to say fun because of, I'm not a Tampa Bay fan, but you're starting to see some of your young pieces really kind of take the reins in this offense, and you got to have hope that, hey, maybe if we can find our franchise quarterback in the next few years and really start to maybe replenish this receiver core, guys like Rashad White, K. Dot, and can be some of those building blocks that we continue moving forward with. Not even to mention, some of those guys they have on the offensive line. So, yeah, good win for Tampa. For Atlanta, it's hilarious that they actually tried to use their playmakers this time and they still lost. Drake London, oh my gosh, it's crazy how I've been talking about throwing him the ball once again. Like, the guy's proven to be way better than honestly I think either of us expected in the NFL. Like, we both kind of had concerns about his ability to get separation, all these things. He doesn't really have those problems. Like, I mean, he's not, Stephon Diggs or Cooper Kupp or, Justin Jefferson by any means, but like the guy he's a baller. And this week he had some of those kind of plays, but he also had plays where you just go throw it up in double coverage and he would go get it. Yeah. 10 catches for 172 yards. Probably the best. I don't know statistically if it is, but I'm assuming this is the best game of his career. And Kyle Pitts, 3 catches, 57 yards. He got a touchdown. Bijan had 34 yards on the ground and a touchdown, as well as 54 yards through the air. So, like, your 3 top 10 picks were very heavily involved, and you lost. So, I don't know if Arthur Smith is going to use this as justification for forcing the ball to Michael Pruitt and Kadero Hodge moving forward. But, yeah, really unfortunate loss for the Falcons. Their defense just simply wasn't able to get it done for them, which is kind of a shame because their defense has been, I would say, the better of the 2 units, honestly, throughout the year. And we just got a performance in which Desmond Ridder threw for 347 yards, all the things that I just mentioned about the other guys. And, even some of like the other stats, like they only had 2 penalties. They did Ridder threw the interception, but that was the only turnover. Like it felt like Atlanta played a good, clean game. They just simply got beat.
Yeah, well, I mean, wasn't clean enough. Like you mentioned the interception, and that was led to 8-yard touchdown. And then also, I want to throw out special teams. Fortunately, my guy Younghoe Koo, 2 missed field goals as well.
That's true. I forgot about that.
Could have been, literally would have flipped the score, obviously, and it could have been an entirely different ball game. And so, yeah, and honestly, like once again, you mentioned playmakers did great. Guy lean on Ridder because he also took, a couple. I think if I remember correctly, the safety took a safety where he maybe held onto the ball a bit long. So once again, pocket awareness. We've mentioned things, some of those nuances he's still having issues with. And on the flip side, yeah, I think he hit it perfectly in regards to Tampa, where just their playmakers make enough plays, and unlike recent weeks where the defense didn't come through for them, against Houston and such, their defense finally did. Which is a relief because their defense, I definitely felt going to see. I was like, okay, if anyone should be carrying them, it should be their defense. And in recent weeks, their defense kind of dropped the ball. Even this one, I would argue, because once again, like you mentioned, Ridder had a great game throwing the ball, and they could not stop Drake London, who is great, but like they have to have talent in that secondary. Carlton Davis is still good, and Antoine Winfield. So like they have guys that we like and guys that we're confident in, and a good front 4, but. They've been kind of gassed recently, but unless they figure out a way to get the win and and complicate this NFC South picture going forward, and just in general NFC playoff picture. But in regards to the division, like you mentioned, we'll talk about the Saints here in a second. But yeah, they further throw a wrench into that. But let us move on to another, once again, surprising result, going to be kind of the theme of this week, as the New York Jets, they get the win over the Houston Texans. And not only that, they score 30 points in doing so. Some would say it was Zach Wilson revenge game, as they beat the Texans 30-6. CJ Stroud knocked down the fourth quarter, but even then, their Houston offense could not do much. Had a few injuries, of course, but nonetheless, surprising result is that the Jets kind of blow them out. What were your thoughts here, John, in regards to this result?
I don't want to be the party pooper and talk about the elephant in the room here, because it's a great win for the Jets. But man, you gotta wonder, they're sitting at 5-8, and we wasted 2 weeks on Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian. And I'm not saying that Zach Wilson necessarily wins them those games, like especially the Dolphins game. But maybe that Falcons one where they lost 13-8 literally a week ago, Zach Wilson just threw for 300 yards against this Houston defense. Like, once again, I'm not saying that this performance is all of a sudden Zach Wilson's the greatest quarterback of all time, blah, blah, blah. But he showed that, like, he can get the ball to the playmakers. They can score a lot of points against a solid team and a solid defense. The Texans defense isn't like world beaters by any means, but they've been good. And I just feel like that kind of overshadowed this win because instead of being maybe 6-7 and still in the race, which they're not fully eliminated from it, but like they'd be far more in it if they were sitting at 6-7 than they currently are. So it's a great win for the Jets. It does suck that what happened to C.J. Stroud and the offense because Tank Dell, he didn't play this week. He's out. Then you got C.J. Stroud getting injured. Then on top of that, we had what's his face? Nico Collins. He got injured as well.
Very early in the game, so that already hurt.
So the offense is falling apart, and it's really unfortunate to see. And you got to hope that Stroud and Nico Collins, I haven't seen any reports on him, but maybe they can make it back at some point in the season because they're sitting at 7-6, and it feels like, especially with the schedule that they have to close it out here, although it's not the easiest with Cleveland, you play the Titans twice, and those are winnable games. They are divisional games, so anything can happen. But I think if healthy, people would definitely be taking the Texans there. And if you win those two, you're sitting at a potential 9-win season with winnable opportunities against Cleveland and Indianapolis. So it's a real shame because with Davis Mills, with no receivers, things could just get really tough for the Texans moving forward the rest of the season. And it'd be, like I said, it'd be a real shame considering the season they had because they've been just so impressive on the year as a whole.
Yeah, they have, like we mentioned, they have definitely exceeded expectations.
Yeah.
So it just sucked that this would kill the momentum. At least can't get to see a little bit more of it and see if it can blossom even more and possibly make noise in the playoffs. But we'll see, obviously, what happens. Stroud and concussion protocol. Obviously, I know that because I have him in a couple leagues. I'm not sure. Like I said, we'll see how both him and Nico, their health status going forward. And then, just to add on what you mentioned about the Jets. Yeah, I mean, once again, like Zach Wilson was a first round talent for a reason. I know like he hasn't lived exactly up to his pick and maybe even the first round, you could argue, obviously. But he's a talent for a reason. In regards to Tim Boyle and Trevor Seaman, at least Zach Wilson, you saw he can extend plays, and he does have like a live arm that can make plays on the run. You saw that this game, definitely more so than we have recently. I'm not really sure kind of what was the difference in regards to offensive play calling. Hey, maybe the fact they didn't score in their first half shows that, and maybe you could say he kind of got hot, found his rhythm in the second half, and they started getting going, the Jets offense, and obviously their defense. We know that they're very good, and it helps when your offense finally kind of holds up there in the bargain there. So, yeah, we'll see. Maybe there's still a bit of a heartbeat for the Jets. We'll see. They need a lot of help just in regards to what they have to do, and they also need some help from exterior forces, i.e. other teams, probably other scenarios that has to fall their way. While Texans, we'll see, like I mentioned, the health status of some of their young playmakers going forward. But now let's go on.
I just want to say real quick, the reason that I was talking about the whole 6-7 thing too is like they do play Miami next week, which is once again a tough game. But after that, like the three remaining games they have are Washington and I don't know if he's going to play, but apparently Aaron Rodgers is going to be cleared by that time, so he could play the last three games. They play Washington, Cleveland, and the Patriots. Washington and the Patriots. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers is playing in those games, I think they should win. I don't know about his health status, but once again, like they have the defense, they got Brees Hall. Assuming it's Aaron Rodgers, right? They should win those games. And if they were sitting at 6-7 right now, they go to 6-8 if they lose to the Dolphins. Maybe they pull off the win. Who knows? It's a divisional game. It's tough to beat a team twice. So maybe they pull off the win. But let's just say they lose. They're 6-8. You beat Washington. The Cleveland game is anybody's ball game. Two tough defenses. It could come down to a very low-scoring game. Once again, Aaron Rodgers might be playing in that one. So if they win against the Browns and then they win against the Patriots, they could have finished 9-8. And that's kind of why the whole Zach Wilson thing frustrates me, because everybody blames him. Blah, blah. They took all their hate out on him, and they wasted around for 2 weeks with Tim Boyle and these guys. And once again, maybe Zach Wilson still goes out there and loses those games. But when you lose a game 13-8, I can't help but feel that maybe Zach Wilson, who, like you said, can at least keep plays alive, could have done a little bit better than Tim Boyle, who didn't even complete 50% of his passes. He threw an interception, and I don't know, just everything went wrong in that game. So, yeah, like I just really feel like the Jets, I don't want to rant too long.
They played themselves. The Jets, you played yourselves. You literally played
They
yourselves.
put themselves in this situation when they really didn't need to, and it's kind of dumb. It's kind of dumb.
Yeah, that's why sometimes cultures, confidence in your own decision making, blocking out exterior noise is valued and crucial for some organizations. And and Rodgers alluded to that on the McAfee show recently. I know you mentioned hey, there's too many people leaking stuff in the Jets front office. They probably kind of called them out for that.
But also even just like Robert Saleh, like come on, man.
Yeah.
Like Tim Boyle, dude. Tim Boyle, like what are we doing? Once again, you kept saying the grass isn't always greener. Sure, you can criticize Zach Wilson all you want, but are we really gonna play Tim Boyle, dude? Like, come on.
Yeah. So, well, Jets fans, there you go. Hopefully, that kind of puts at least that argument to rest, and we'll see, what the future holds, the near future, especially because it's like typical Jets fans. It's still interesting, obviously, with the whole mystique of Rodgers and their playoff chances. Still alive. Like I said, still got.
If they can beat Miami this next week, then the door is open because the Aaron Rodgers is supposed to apparently return after that.
And apparently he's already, limited snaps in 7-on-7 is what he said. I don't know. Once again, grain of salt, people. What does limited mean? Does it mean just one or two? Like, I don't know. So, anyhow, enough of the Jets. Let's move on. Let's go on back to the NFC South. I'm sure that's where everyone wants to go right now. As this one was relatively cut and dry, as the New Orleans Saints, they handled business against the Carolina Panthers, 28-6. Was looking a little bit shaky in the first quarter. Then obviously the Saints kind of found their way and ran away with this one. Even Jimmy Graham caught a touchdown in the fourth quarter. So what were your thoughts here in regards to the Saints beating the Panthers?
I picked the Panthers in our pick'ems to cover. I don't even remember what the spread was.
It was 5.5. I think that was why, because you're like, it might be a close game. You threading a needle.
And I was attempting it, and then literally the game started, and that second quarter happened where the Saints went up 14-3 going into halftime, and I was like, I don't know why I tried to thread that needle. The Panthers offense just was not great. The offensive line wasn't great. I did get to watch a little bit of this game because I was flipping around through the games on the side screen, and I was checking in on players I have in different leagues, Alvin Kamara and these kind of guys, and Bryce Young, every time I flipped over to that game where it happened to show up on the red zone, like he was having to run for his life, and it's rough over there in Carolina. And for the Saints, I mean, they got the win. They're 6-7. I kept mentioning last week the most NFC South thing that could possibly happen is all three of the teams have the same record. I don't know what the tiebreakers are, looking like for the end of the season, but at least as of right now, I'm pretty sure the Buccaneers are sitting atop the NFC South. So
that is correct.
Yeah, just a wild week overall for the NFC South, and for the Saints, they took care of business. So good for them.
Honestly, just a wild week for the NFC. Like I think I'm gonna allude to this, because I'm looking at the live standings now per NFL Jesus. So I'm pretty sure they're right. I think everyone, no one was in the same seating as they were the previous week, and then obviously Tampa jumped in. Not much to mention here. You mentioned the Panthers. Like we're seeing it. Like Thielen's their best receiver, lacking any sort of even help, like a dynamic receiver to help Bryce Young, and that's saying a lot in regards to I was a huge DJ Chark guy. He's obviously not that guy, and Thielen's not that guy anymore. It is encouraging they're at least trying to run the ball. So maybe, with Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard. So hey, maybe if they can at least.
But even then,
find an identity, because I feel like they don't even have an identity. Like if they tried to do the spread offense for a bit, and that still hasn't really worked. And now it seems like okay, let's just try to be a run heavy team. And it's
have we talked about the reports about that are coming out of Carolina?
We have not talked about it on the podcast. I don't even talk about it. I've been seeing it in the group. It's so if you want to go ahead and kind of share some light.
I mean, basically, they fired Frank Reich, and there's been rumors of them. Well, first off, they had this whole crazy interview where the owner, David Tepper, talked about the Bryce Young situation. He was like, the whole reason we fired Frank Reich is because we're trying to make the best move for Bryce Young's future. And so they felt like that, is, I guess, the best move for his future. Whether you agree with that or not, so be it. But then he starts talking about the draft, and he was like, yeah, we were going to trade up to number 2 and draft CJ Stroud. And then, because we thought Houston was going to get the number 1 pick and they were going to take Bryce Young. But then they didn't get it, and we were able to trade up for it, and everybody in the building wanted Bryce Young. And we all like Bryce. But it just felt like a weird comment to say now, because, like, Stroud is doing so good. Like, just, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
It's just like, the remember, like, what happened, like, Tua's first couple of years, where there was that whole conversation about, like, Brian Flores wanted Justin Herbert. And it's like, listen, man, whether it's true or not, like, if I'm an organization, I'm not addressing anything about that at all. I'm not doing anything to even entertain that conversation, because it doesn't matter anymore. You should have taken this guy. You should have taken that guy. Who cares? You didn't. Here's your guy. Here's who you got. And I'm not saying that Bryce Young is necessarily, he's so much worse than Stroud or whatever. Like, this season he is, obviously, but who knows about the future. I'm not writing him off by any means. But I just felt like that was weird. I don't know if you had any thoughts on, David Tepper even doing that.
It sounds like, just felt like a lot of trying to justify, like, hey, like, we all loved him and such, and listen, like, yeah, like, you don't have to tell us, David, like, we understand that, yeah. So it felt,
right.
I understand what you're kind of coming from, where it's like, felt a little bit useless, and
yeah,
you didn't really, like, okay, we got it, like, you obviously, yeah, you had the first overall pick, you could have gotten whoever you wanted, and so you chose.
Yeah, exactly. You picked him. You don't have to justify why you picked them. We figure it's because you want him.
Yes. So yeah, it just felt like, I agree, though, it didn't help. If anything, it feeds more into that narrative a little bit, and then
like, the franchise even addressing it, I feel like, is going to make that conversation become more of a thing as CJ Stroud continues to do well, as the Texans start to add weapons, I assume, this next offseason, and they improve the offense, blah blah blah. Like, if the Panthers don't do so, then the conversation is just going to heat up even more. So but then the next thing was, obviously, because they fired Frank Reich, there's a coach opening, and this is the first one of the season. No, Raiders technically were, but this is, I mean, it's open,
second
right?
one.
So, yeah, second one of the season, and because it happened closer to the end, people are starting to speculate on who they might hire. And obviously, Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, has become a very popular name. He was potentially going to get interviews last offseason. I think he got 1 or 2. Now he is looking like he might be, like, the hot candidate to, get one of the jobs. And apparently there was some Carolina Panthers staffers that were texting Ben Johnson and saying, do not come to Carolina. The culture here is terrible. They specifically referenced the Hunger Games in comparison to the culture they have, which is a wild thing to ever be compared to for a culture ever, because that's like a dystopian, like, completely made up book.
Yeah.
That's like, and the fact that your football team is being compared to that at all is ridiculous. And I don't, it is, David Tepper is starting to get into that, like, Jerry Jones, Jim Irsay, like, that kind of, like, conversation where it's like, all right, just shut your mouth. Like, every time you talk, like, it's getting worse. But now, if this culture thing is true, now it's maybe he's getting to some Dan Snyder territory. I don't know. Things in Carolina are just unraveling really fast.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if you mentioned, it seems like he's definitely a hands-on owner, and I think I'll be shocked if that limits, like you already mentioned with the Ben Johnson. Sorry,
Ben Johnson. Yeah.
Ben Johnson, excuse me. Sorry, Ben. But in regards to Ben Johnson, that may deter some candidates like Ben Johnson or anyone else from wanting that job, especially since it's already tough that you don't have your first round pick just to at least as a jump off point for someone to start the rebuild. Because like free agency, we've mentioned, like, free agency is tough because you're definitely going to overpay because it's free agency. It's basically a bidding war. You're going to have to, you may get lucky and find a bargain bin, I'm trying to think, like James Conner-esque type situation where, okay, like, this guy's actually a solid player for you. But most of the time tends to be an overpay. And on top of the fact that usually you want to capitalize on, the whole capitalize on the rookie wage scale, with these young quarterbacks seems to be the trend. That's tough to do that, especially without another high pick, another chance to get an elite prospect next to, or at least on the team to help him out. So, it'll be interesting to see, and it's very interesting to see that they didn't even really get that interim head coach buff too. Because just to add on last point too, I think they also let go of not only Reich, like their quarterbacks coach, and I think their OC as well. They let go of a couple of people too. So it's like kind of goes back to the point where you were mentioning. It's like, well, you said that this is all supposed to help Bryce Young, but like, was it? I don't know. It didn't seem like it was that terrible that you had to let go of like all the remaining coaching staff. And now got to get new ears, new voices, new coaches ish in his ear midway through his rookie season, amidst of all the other stuff that they have to deal with. So,
I don't know. I just can't imagine how, unless Frank Reich is like somehow sabotaging Bryce Young, I don't know how firing him would somehow make Bryce Young better in the middle of the season. I don't know.
Yeah, and he's supposed to be, renowned kind of quarterback guru guy. At least an offensive guy. He's an offensive guy, so you'd think it'd be good to, keep someone around, bring him around. But who knows what will happen, what the future holds in store, and if the Panthers can at least get some momentum going forward, because it's not looking great as they still only have one win on the season. And like I mentioned, their pick, not theirs, goes to the Bears. So it's not them losing is not benefiting them at all. At least. So, so we'll see. Unfortunately, we have to keep tabs on that lovely NFC South going forward. But let's go to one of the games that were actually very competitive and honestly contention for game of the year. I would say it was at least game of the week competitive wise, as it was the Baltimore Ravens holding off the LA Rams 37-31 in Baltimore. Crazy overtime ending, obviously with the punt return to, ice literally win the game, walk-off punt return. I heard this on Pro Football Talk Monday where they're saying that is the fourth time a game has ended, regular season game, has been ended by overtime by kick return, punt return. Oddly enough, two of those happened this year, week one with the Jets and now here with the Baltimore Ravens. And it was their backup returner too because Devin Duvernay was out in this one. So, wow game, John. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, pretty insane game. I didn't get to watch a ton of this one, unfortunately, until sort of the end. And I think the second quarter is when a lot of the lights happened. But the final drives between both teams, I mean, it was just great overall offense. Like, it was cool to see Stafford and Lamar Jackson kind of battle it back and forth. Both Cooper Kupp and Odell had great games, and that was fun to see because obviously Odell, I mean, somewhat of a revenge game. It's not like he has bad blood with the Rams. The guy won a Super Bowl with them, but still, former team for him. And then Cooper Kupp, he's been battling with injuries this year, and they've really made it inconsistent for him. And so it was cool to see him have a really strong performance. And just in general, I don't know, both offenses did a lot of great stuff, both on the ground and through the air. And it was really fun to see them have that back and forth duel because, I don't know, even though the league is kind of trying to trend towards these way more offensive performances, it doesn't feel like we always have these super high scoring games. It feels like they are still somewhat few and far between in terms of the overall season, especially between two really solid trending teams. It does suck for the Rams because it felt like they had this one in their grasp, and then all of a sudden, late, they, with 4 minutes left, they do allow that touchdown to Zay Flowers. Luckily for them, they did get the field goal to tie. But, it just seems like they were in a situation where I felt like they could have closed it out, and then they allowed the Ravens just march down the field and get it done again. So, great win from for the Ravens. They needed this one. They're sitting at 10-3. You want to talk about the race for the AFC, the top seed. This was a huge one for them because if they drop this one, things could just get really dicey because they would not control their own destiny moving forward. So, well, actually, I don't know because at least at the time, because the Dolphins hadn't played yet and they won, or they lost. So, yeah, things could have just got real dicey if they lost, but they handled their business and they now sit atop the AFC alone.
Yeah, and they do play each other, Baltimore, Miami down the line. So that game, even if maybe now if Baltimore drops that game or another game, there's more cushion. But yeah, wild game. In regards, I want to start with Lamar Jackson. Like once again, no one's really. I want to hear all the Lamar can't throw critics because he's dicing teams up now, and and with it on a year where we know the running back situation is, man, like Keaton Mitchell even like we know he's electric, but he's still he only got 9 touches on the ground, and Lamar was their leading rusher again. Like,
he's not gonna get 20 touches. Like he's not that kind of guy yet.
He's not that. He's just not built that way right off the bat. He's more of a speed kind of scat back. We'll see if he can become that guy. But I mean, great to see Odell obviously get going late in the season, and obviously Zay Flowers as well. And I was very high on the draft, so good to see that there's a connection there. And I just want to throw some flowers Lamar, and also throw some flowers like Stafford's way. Stafford once again, like an amazing performance. Despite even that amazing play with where he threw it to Puka Nacua, and Puka made obviously a great play on it, but like obviously Stafford made a pinpoint throw with a guy literally barreling down on him, and that's just another day in the office for Matthew Stafford. I'm just saying that because it was concerning, kind of his midpoint early in the year. He was starting to get those thumb injuries, and you mentioned Cup too. He was dealing with his injuries, so unfortunate they got the loss here because it's a really good game for both of those guys and their offense as well. And also Kyron Williams still was really effective for them. I was very surprised that they were able to run the ball as well as they were, and just have success overall against the Ravens. It just goes to show.
I was going to say, I feel like the fact that they had that success, though, is super encouraging. Obviously didn't get the win, but since Kyron Williams has come back, like they've been so dominant and now continue to do it against one of the best teams in the NFL. Like it was a great offensive performance.
Yeah, and then just unfortunate, great punt, kind of a wild punt return because there's like 3 or 4 missed tackles that Wallace broke through or tripped up, and then he managed to get his balance and run it in. So just unfortunate when that one slipped out of the Rams' fingers, but a great one nonetheless. And like you mentioned, Baltimore giving themselves a good cushion and now sit with no tiebreaker needed as of right now. No tiebreaker needed. They are atop the AFC. And kind of like you mentioned, they do control their own destiny going forward, at least as of right now. So, big win for the Ravens, and Rams still in the FC playoff picture. They had some help. We'll obviously talk about those teams later. But sticking in the AFC playoff picture, because the wild card picture, while the top, kind of clarified itself, the wild card race got a little more complicated. Granted, the Colts are still in the playoffs as of right now, but they did lose to the Cincinnati Bengals, which I mentioned. I'll say it. A couple weeks ago, as soon as the Burrow injury happened, I was like, they are done. I officially called them dead. Since then, they've gone 2-0. Jake Browning and the gang and the offense have kind of not looked like they've already lost a step, to be honest. Although it is a downgrade, but nonetheless, John, your thoughts in regards to the Bengals beating up on the Colts 34-14.
Very impressive result. I do want to give a shout out to their coaching staff because to overcome the Joe Burrow injury, I agreed. I thought they were done for. Then all of a sudden that Jacksonville game happened, and I was like, wait, hold on. Like they might actually be cooking, and they're continuing to do really well. Like they're putting Jake Browning in successful situations, whether that's they're doing it in multiple ways because, it could be a big Jamar Chase week, or it could be like this week where, okay, maybe it's not going to be Jamar, but we're going to get T. Higgins involved. We're going to run it very heavily with Joe Mixon, and then we're going to try and get some of our electric playmakers involved. And the Bengals coaching staff, to their credit, I didn't hear this directly, but I heard this from someone made this point that like one of the Bengals beat writers was saying that he has noticed that the coaching staff throughout the season has continued to comment on Chase Brown in practice, and over the course of the last month have really started to mention him increasingly more in terms of we want to get him involved. And that wasn't smoke and mirrors because they're doing it. He had 8 carries for 25 yards, but then the even bigger, he had 3 catches for 80 yards, one being, what was it, like a 70-yard touchdown or something like that?
54.
So, 54-yard touchdown. So, like, a huge play from Chase Brown to start the game. And, that's a rookie right there who's just finding a way to make plays. And so credit to the coaching staff for continuing to get multiple people involved, for finding ways to make plays happen because you don't have the Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase big plays that you used to, and then putting Jake Browning in successful situations, whether that's the screens or, what have you. So, yeah, credit to the Bengals coaching staff because, yeah, I mean, the fact that they're sitting 7-6 right now, I think is very impressive, especially after the way they started the season and then after the Joe Burrow injury.
Yeah, and I want to add to that credit to the defensive coaching staff too, because in actuality, only gave up 8 points. 2 point, the 1 touchdown and 2 point conversion, but the other 6 points was the pick six. So, yeah, I mean, shutting down pretty much a Colts offense that was coming in red hot, and obviously we're able to completely stymie that run game. And we've mentioned before, like, the Bengals defense is talented. They've just kind of been up and down this year. And I think we saw this game. Obviously, they were locked in, eliminated the run game, and then it was really tough on the Colts in their passing game once they had to lean on that. And obviously, as the game grew on, they became more one-dimensional. And yeah, it's very exciting to see for the Bengals, at least in regards to playmakers. Interesting, the whole Chase Brown thing. Because even if, regardless of what happens, as long as he keeps playing, I remember they're already thinking about moving on from Mixon after last year. I'm not saying that they will this offseason, but just adds another weapon possibly, and one less thing you have to worry about come draft time or free agency, and then they can, there's one less position you have to address, possibly, because he's looking like he could be a very contributing piece for them, and if their offensive line can just play the way they have in the past 2 weeks, obviously going to next year and maybe improve, they can make a jump. And who knows, maybe they can make noise going forward and somehow sneak into the playoffs. That would be wild. But when knowing the NFL, especially after this week, wouldn't shock me. But great win for Jake Browning and the Cincinnati Bengals, as they keep their playoff hopes alive. Although Colts technically still sitting on that last wild card spot in the AFC even after the loss. So sky's not falling for them yet. They are still good to go in regards to that. Let's move on over to the West Coast to a game that was also pretty cut and dry, as it was the San Francisco 49ers beating the Seattle Seahawks 28-16. Was competitive, but then second half, especially, the 49ers kind of just ran away with this one. Obviously, no Geno Smith for the Seahawks. Drew Lock filled in. What were your thoughts here in regards to the 49ers getting the win?
I was hoping that the Seahawks could maintain that competitiveness because obviously Dallas needs some help in regards to the potential 1-seed race. And I really felt like for the Niners' schedule, they play the Ravens at the end of the year, but this was probably the second toughest game left. And so it's kind of a bummer that the Niners were able to come out on top for me. But overall, I don't know. I felt like Seattle, they definitely showed some fight in this one compared to when they last played them. The end result was largely the same, but I do feel like this game was a little bit closer than the scoreboard. It was just like, it was a very tight game, and then San Francisco kind of got that nail in the coffin touchdown to end it. So, a resilient win from the Niners. Not surprised they won. They did their thing. McCaffrey had another great day. By the way, Deebo Samuel has been having an insane year. I got to throw that in there because he's been kind of nuts, and it's honestly been super impressive to see because I don't want to say like he was being written off, but it definitely felt like last year, like after McCaffrey showed up, that maybe he wasn't going to be as good as he once was, but he's definitely still a baller. So, yeah, in general, Niners keep rolling.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the effect of him being healthy, and maybe we haven't seen him obviously be utilized. You still see him a bit in the backfield and get carries, but not to the much that it was a couple of years ago. So maybe that helps, in regards to keeping him fresh. And we're seeing he's still making those same dynamic plays with the ball in his hands. I also want to throw out though, Brandon Ayuk been very good for them this year too. He's been a big. Him and Purdy seem to have a very good connection as well, and I think that's been big as just another. We were kind of waiting for that, another person on the outside that can scare you outside of Devo. And, Kittle's still effective, obviously. He got a touchdown. He's kind of like the unfortunate kind of unsung hero at times. But, we're seeing when San Francisco's healthy, like, it's just hard because they have the talent, they have this scheme, like it all works for them, and it's just so hard to overcome. Because honestly, like it could have been more because I don't know if you remember, there was off one of the Drew Lock interceptions. They did have a big chunk play from Ayuk, and Ayuk got stripped, and that kind of Seattle didn't do anything with the ball after that. But that could have been at least another 3. Who knows? Maybe not a touchdown. The way San Francisco was just punching in touchdown after touchdown, especially from the start of the game when McCaffrey almost ripped out the opening run for a touchdown as well. So and for Seattle, I mean, it was Drew Lock. So even as a former Drew Lock supporter, not shocked the result. You saw some good from him, and you saw some bad in regards to a couple of the picks, and maybe a couple of the sacks they took because he was holding on to the ball a little too long, or trying to make a play that wasn't there. We'll see. Seattle not dead, still has a heartbeat, but obviously hopefully they can get Geno back. They get Kenneth Walker back technically this game, so hopefully that will help them going forward. But yeah, Niners keep trucking along and dominating, and we'll see who, if anyone, can slow down that train in the next coming weeks. Speaking, let's go on to this next game, and this will be really short because this one, I messaged
This
John.
is the Vikings Raiders game. I have no thoughts. I have no thoughts.
Vikings Raiders. Vikings win 3-0. Nick Mullins is the starter. I feel like that's all you need to know. Sorry, Josh Dobbs.
Apparently, Josh Dobbs, by the way, has been benched moving forward.
Yes.
Do you know? Is he just been that bad?
He hasn't been great. So I mean, I understand it. I mean, once again, Nick Mullins actually has been there since the preseason and such. So maybe also like, hey, maybe Nick just knows more of the offense. He did technically do more in his limited time on the field. So yeah, I could see why.
I said I had no thoughts. I will say, at least for Josh Dobbs, I feel like some people might all of a sudden like want to trash him for this. Like, let's not forget, like the guy's a backup quarterback. Okay,
yes.
Like let's not give him the same expectations that a starter would have had. Him getting benched is not like if Kirk Cousins got benched. So.
Yes, and I saw Kirk Cousins like this. Regardless, he played a part in them, still being alive in this playoff race at 7-6. Yeah. So we'll see if Nick Mullins can keep that torch alive. All for the Raiders. This may be the final nail in the coffin. 5-8. We'll see how it goes going forward for them. But just a lot of ineptitude here, and no shock as you see the quarterback play. You see honestly, no offense to the franchise. You see these franchises, it's honestly not that much of a shock. Those poor Vegas people that had showed up. I'm sure they paid good money, but hey, sometimes it happens. Sometimes you get 3 zeros, although that's like incredibly rare. We'll move on from that one to a game that got a bunch of headlines beforehand, and especially afterwards, as it was the Buffalo Bills getting a much needed win over the Kansas City Chiefs, who got the things are happening there as they were kind of on a skid now. Bills win 20-17. Obviously, everyone's talking about the end of the game. As we're recording today, Mahomes has at least owned up that maybe he was a little. I forgot his phrasing, but he's basically mentioned maybe he's a little bit too salty afterwards, especially towards Josh Allen.
Honestly, he probably saw the screenshot.
And he may, because once again, okay, let's just dive right into that, because it was the Kadarius Toney. It was a great play, but unfortunately he lined up off sides, and like we mentioned before, it's not the ref threw that flag before the play probably even happened. He is offsides, even if I know this is a line on TV, but the line isn't always accurate, and according to many people, like my boy Sims, and I've seen other, like I think Orlovsky mentioned it too, like Tony did not check with the referee, which, as someone that also played wide receiver in middle school, that's the first thing they tell you in middle school, which is, hey, you put your hand towards the wide, you find the outside referee, you put your hand, just motion or do something to acknowledge him, and he'll tell you to back up or not. Like, it's literally a free. That's free. They'll tell you that. So, and apparently too, I'm not sure if this one's true. I did see like a post, like there were multiple times where Tony did technically line off sides. Some people that went back and looked. That was the first time he was flagged for it that game. So, unfortunate that it happened. It is the rule. Yes, it was a great play, but hey, just make sure you line up on sides, and that won't happen. But nonetheless, any thoughts on that and this game?
So I actually heard an added wrinkle. This is from Dean Blandino. I don't know what network he's on. I think it's CBS or something. Yeah. But he's one of those like former like refs, former head officiating guys who now is like commentating for one of the networks. Anyway, he said that according to the league, this is actually specifically being called more than ever before, this specific thing. I think he said last year it was only called twice. This year it's already been called 11 times, is offensive offsides. And obviously Mahomes is saying, I have never seen that called. He said that it's never even happened for the Chiefs since 2004. So, of course, Mahomes has never seen it. But, I mean, if you look at the screenshot, like Kadarius Toney is definitely offsides. Like his foot is way over the line. And not even like the TV line. Like when you look at the yardage lines, like he's offsides. But Blandino said this is an added emphasis by the NFL because of the tush push. So it's funny that Jason Kelce and the Eagles doing this has kind of unfortunately come back to bite Travis Kelce and the Chiefs. It's an unfortunate side effect of apparently with the tush push, obviously the way that the offense is so clumped up and lined up, there's potential offensive offsides that could be happening, right? With other offensive linemen, tight ends, all that stuff, potentially trying to get an edge and pushing a little too far forward. And because of that, the league has started to call this way more, and it's now hitting receivers too. So I don't know if that's fully true, but Dean Blandino, considering his resume, his career, and who he is, seems like he'd be a credible source on this. So anyway, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was the right call. I thought it was kind of funny that Andy Reid after the game was like, usually they give me a warning about something like this, and I'm like, yo, I think that's kind of dumb. Why should a ref give a coach a warning that a penalty is about to happen? Like, I don't feel like that should ever happen for any coach. Like, if there's a penalty, there's a penalty, because I don't know, it just feels like there's going to be times so the ref is going to miss it and they won't warn you, and the penalty is going to get called, which benefits one of the other teams. So how about we just never warn the coach and you have to see it on your own volition and call a timeout?
It's like if there's like if they have 12 men and then the ref's like, hey man, you have 12 guys. Like, oh my God, instead of throwing the flag. You know what I mean? Like, come on, he throws a flag. Because
and I'm not saying that Andy Reid did anything wrong. I'm not saying the refs are colluding with Andy Reid. I'm not even saying that maybe the refs don't do this for every team, but don't think it should happen personally if it does. But at the even bigger point, I don't know. I just feel like I'm qualified to speak on this because the Cowboys have had a lot of situations where my fellow friends, my fans, the Cowboys organization, even the players at times have blamed the refs. And Aaron, how many times have I had to come on this show and said, listen, if you want to stop blaming the refs, then how about you just win by 2 scores and you won't have to, because then a call like that at the end of the game won't influence it in the way that it did. I've said that so many times about my own team.
Yeah.
And, that's how it goes. And I'm glad that Mahomes kind of walked it back, especially the fact that he talked to Josh Allen, because that was definitely a salty moment right there. We've all been there, when something stupid goes the other guy's ways and you feel like you kind of got robbed or whatever, and you saltily say something to the opponent, but it's like, come on. Like, for Josh, that was probably an awkward moment where you're like, hey, sorry, man. Because, Josh Allen, unfortunately, lost to you guys in the playoffs in overtime because he didn't get to touch the ball. So, like, what are you sitting there, like, crying about? I know it happened to Mahomes, too, when they played against the Patriots, like, his sophomore season. But I don't know. It was a salty moment. I'm glad that I think he apologized in the quote that I saw. He said he was sorry and he wished he didn't do that to Josh. And then he walked it kind of back. But in general, I don't know. I didn't really love the response from the Chiefs, at least the day of the game, because when you look at the shot, it was the right call. And I don't know. Like I said, if you want the refs to not be a factor, just play better.
Yeah. Only thing I want to add is for the Bills, hey, we talk about it all the time. It was a day where, man, not anyone was going to go in, especially in the passing. Diggs was 4 for 24. Chiefs were all over him. We saw it before, obviously, but I think we're starting to see a little more volume of James Cook, at least. So something we've been preaching. Cook very effective on the ground, 10 for 58, but especially receiving wise too. Especially at the start of the game, it seemed like their opening sequence had emphasis on getting him going, and obviously it worked out. As they, that early they jumped out to. That was all they really needed. They hung on, made a few plays, a couple times later in the game to obviously the 2 field goals to get them ahead, and they just hung on. And I mean, obviously it's been a tough couple of weeks for Kansas City. It's still good to see, though. I do want to point some positives. Obviously, Kelsey's been finally a little bit putting up better numbers, more Kelsey-like numbers. Rashee Rice, another week of him being consistent. You didn't have Pacheco in this game, and I think this is really a game where you missed him because their run game is relatively ineffective, and that kind of plays into Buffalo's hands because Buffalo wants to get into kind of a drop back pass. They're very good. That's where the defense thrives in, is going back in zones, and especially without a reliable dynamic receiver that the Chiefs obviously don't have, since Tyreek Hill obviously that makes life easier on the Bills, I feel like. So, and we're starting to see so, but nonetheless, like. Sky's not falling, Kansas City. I think you're 8-5. You're good. Like, I expect them to turn this around. You just got to make the dance. It's like they're like the Patriots of old, where they just got to get in the playoffs. And I'm sure, I'm not sure if they'll win it or not. But hey, I think they can win any given Sunday as long as 15, and most of those guys are out there. So tough loss for the Chiefs. Another tough one. But like we mentioned, this one refs made the right call. And trust me, we mentioned before. We've also mentioned times where the refs have missed calls. I mean, right last week, I openly said I'm a Packer fan. Yeah, that was PI. Guy was all over MVS, but hey, no call. But this week we try to keep it. We see what we see. What we saw was, Tony, you were offside. So unfortunate there, and we'll see if they can button that up going forward, because that's been their issue. Is just miscues and mistakes. Kansas City right now, most of them kind of self-written. But anyway,
and also I just want to say. Final thing too on this, let's not act like Kansas City hasn't had some games earlier in the year where opposing teams felt very screwed by the refs. Notably that Jets game, whether it was the right call or not, like the Jets fans felt very upset about what the refs were doing in that game. I mean, so it goes both ways. It happens to every team. It goes both ways.
Yeah, that's part of weathering the storm that the coaches love to throw out. So,
and I say that for the record to Chiefs fans, if you're listening, the Cowboys, I think, are the most penalized team in the NFL this year. If not first, they're second. So we got more penalties than you guys do.
Yeah, and they're still relatively the same success. I mean, technically better record, I think. But anyway, let's move on over to another AFC West game, actually a divisional game between the Broncos and Chargers. Broncos win 24-7. We mentioned earlier, obviously Herbert knocked out of this one. Was it a hand or a finger injury, right? I think.
Yeah, he had a finger injury that had been bothering him for a couple weeks, and I think he hit it again or something.
If I remember correctly, that injury was on his opposite hand. This one's on his throwing hand. So it was like he had injured the opposite hand finger.
Well, so obviously both hands are down. So.
Yeah, so that's probably why he's already on IR. As of today, They already put him on IR, shut him down for apparently the rest of the season, which means only 4 weeks left anyway. So, looking like the Chargers, I assume we'll be packing it in. It'll be interesting to see. It feels like Brand Staley. I feel like we say it every week. Brand Staley's days are numbered. So we'll see if they truly are.
This is probably the nail in the coffin, though, because without Herbert, it feels so unlikely that they're going to be able to do much.
And we kind of saw that in this game. So, any thoughts or analysis on this one?
The only thought that I had was it was nice to see Quentin Johnston get 91 yards. He had a big play downfield where Easton Stick threw it to him. I don't know. Maybe Easton Stick, because he's the backup, doesn't necessarily have as much pressure to win. Might be more willing to just toss it up to Quentin Johnston, because I'm not saying this is a critique of Herbert, but it just never felt like him and Johnston were on the same page. I don't think he trusted him, which is probably fair considering some of the drops that Johnston has had. And this also just might be a Kellen Moore thing, but it just never felt like Johnston was being used as a deep threat almost ever. It felt like all of his targets and routes were within 10 yards, a lot of screen passes, all this kind of stuff. This felt like the first time I actually saw them throw it to him deep that I can at least remember. I'm sure it's happened before this one, but at least that I can remember. And he made a big play. He made a big catch in a contested area. So that was nice to see from him, and he had a nice run after it as well. But other than that, I mean, Keenan Allen, once again, 6 for 68. He kind of did his thing. Eckler actually was efficient this game, but it just really doesn't matter because this offense, it's just rough. And it's unfortunate, too, because the offensive line injuries, not only Mike Williams, but then Josh Palmer, at points Gerald Everett, just a lot of injuries. Austin Eckler missed time. it just feels like, man, that the injuries across this offense have just really been unfortunate on the year, and now it gets capitalized, or it climaxes with Justin Herbert, ending the season going out. It doesn't really matter at this point, though. So I guess it's a good thing because maybe it improves their draft position.
Yeah, so we'll see what they do there. I was commenting on Denver. I mean, they kind of went back to the format that because of the Chargers' Neptune offense. Credit Denver's defense, of course, but Denver on offense went back to kind of what they were doing, their success. Hey, we're going to run the ball, but Russ make a few plays, I'll play action, just manage the game. Hey, maybe a few splash plays here and there. Obviously, they did. Sutton, another solid game from him. And then Russell, really good job of spreading the ball around. And also, good to see them start leaning a little bit more on Javonte Williams. I know he's not showing the efficiency that we'd like, but he's still carrying the main workload and being efficient, or relatively efficient with it. So, hey, maybe he can be a guy that they can. He's one of those backs that I wouldn't be shocked. He just gets better and better as the season goes along, because that is kind of his style. And it's important to remember he's still coming off an ACL injury. So it's very likely with each week he's getting more and more back to his form. So we'll see how that goes going forward. But regardless, Broncos 7-6. They are in the thick of it in the AFC wild card race, and maybe even they're in their own division due to the Chiefs losing, dropping that game. Chiefs now 8-5, so Denver only one game behind Kansas City, and I know they won, but Denver won the one match. Have they played twice? I'm pulling up their schedule now. Sorry,
I think they've only played once.
No, they played twice. So Denver won Denver lost the first time 19-8.
Oh, I forgot about that game. Yeah. That was like the first game that Russell Wilson really just did not do well.
Yeah, so I'm not sure tiebreaker wise, but regardless, only one game back. Chiefs are struggling. Who knows? Like Denver, maybe this is your time to take advantage of that. So we'll see if they can, and if the Chiefs can keep up. Regardless, so let's move on over to the Sunday night game, where it was your Dallas Cowboys dominating the Eagles in Dallas.
Real quick before we move on, just wanted to say for tiebreakers, the Raiders beat the Broncos earlier in the year.
Okay.
And they play the Chargers and Raiders one more time. I don't think the Chiefs have lost to the Chargers or Raiders at all this year.
Correct.
So the after head-to-head, I'm pretty sure it goes to divisional record. Mm-hmm. So the Chiefs, as of today, still hold the tiebreaker.
Yeah, they're 3-1. Denver's 2-2.
Both teams play the Raiders and Chiefs one more time, so there's room for either one to lose. Anyway,
so, who knows? That could shake it up. But yeah, in regards to shaking up too, though, your Cowboys, they shook up the NFC playoff picture and of course the division, and more importantly, I mean, big confidence when beating the Eagles, and not only that, dominating 33-13. As it was, I mean, Eagles offense. Let me double check. Yeah. Didn't score a touchdown. Their amazing offense. It's a tough day in the office for them on both sides of the ball. Floor is yours, John. Your thoughts?
It felt great. Not gonna lie, not gonna sugarcoat it. I love beating Philly, and I love dominating them. Like, just gonna be honest, this wasn't a close game. Dallas absolutely destroyed them in all three facets. Brandon Aubrey hit 2 59-plus yard field goals. That was cool to see, considering that last year, kicking kind of became a weakness, unfortunately, for Dallas at the end of the year. Dak did his thing. The defense completely held the Philadelphia Eagles to absolutely nothing. They got 2 field goals. Don't be fooled by the score. That touchdown was not an offensive touchdown. The Eagles were not capable of doing that in this game.
Scoop and score.
That was a scoop and score off of a Dak fumble, which, whatever. Like, it's fine. They won the game anyway. So, yeah, I really liked what Dallas did here. I liked the patience that Mike McCarthy had with the run. Honestly, then once again, I'm not going to say it yet, but Mike McCarthy this year has impressed me, and I could maybe have to forgive him after the year. We'll see about the end result, because quite frankly, the Cowboys have never really had an issue with the regular season. It's always been the playoffs. So that's why I'm not rushing to judgment yet. But in terms of offense, I've liked the things that he started to do in the way that he is. They're not a run first team, but they have an emphasis on the run, and I like the ways that they try to get Tony Pollard and now a lot more Rico Dowdle involved. Because with Pollard, it felt like at the beginning of the year, There was just a lot of times they were just kind of slamming him up the middle like they used to with Zeke, and it's like, okay, this isn't going to work. So now they've kind of moved Rico into more of that role, and he's having success in it. And then Pollard is getting a lot more of like the open space stuff. They're trying to get him involved in the receiving game. You can see that in the fact that he actually had the most catches for the Cowboys with 7. So, yeah, that was cool to see. It's also nice to see that Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson are really coming into their own and filling out their roles. We saw some Michael Gallup making some big plays with a touchdown and then a big pass down the sideline. Just in general, everything on the Cowboys offense was moving and looked really good. And then on the other side for Philly, turnovers, man, like they did not struggle to move the ball. In terms of total yards, they only had 70 less than Dallas. The issue was that every time they crossed the 50, they fumbled. And one was Hurts, one was Devonta Smith, and one was A.J. Brown, I'm pretty sure. And it is what it is. Like it's a fixable issue. I don't expect that to be what happens to Philly next time. I think that they'll clean it up. But yeah, it was definitely a problem for Philly because, and it's been a problem on the year. I think I saw some stat today that of their 19 turnovers as a team, I think 10 of them have come across the 50-yard line. So over half of your turnovers are happening when you have already made it into your opponent's territory and you are driving down the field. So I guess that's somewhat preferable than turning it over in your own territory, but regardless, yeah, Philly has no struggles moving the ball. It's that. They also had a lot of penalties against them. I will say, I didn't think this game was the most cleanly officiated on either side. There was one call on Darius Slay where they called the pass interference, where I didn't really see anything there. I see why they called it because they're kind of looked like the hand slightly made like a tug on the jersey, but I don't think it actually influenced the play at all. So I thought it was a soft call. There's also that one play where to start the game, Dallas's first touchdown, they picked up a flag. You could maybe make the argument that Tyler Smith actually did hold there. Regardless, the penalties, unfortunately, it just was the bad side of the penalties for Philly this time. They had 95 total penalty yards. But Dallas, in true Dallas fashion, are still plagued by penalties. Like I said, one of the most penalized teams in the league. They had 7 for 60 on their own side. So, yeah, apart from that, like I said, Dallas domination. They were better on third down. They had a ton more time of possession. They were the dominant team. And after the 2 games that the Cowboys and Eagles have played so far, I came out of the first game feeling like Dallas should have won that game. I thought they were the better team. I'm pretty sure I even said that on the podcast, and I don't read the comments, but maybe somebody even I would not be surprised if somebody listened all the way to that point and was like, "You're an idiot." But I felt like they were the better team, even despite the fact they lost that game, and it was because of how close they came multiple times taking the lead, and things just didn't go their way. Well, in this one, they didn't need all those little extra yards and inches because they smacked them around. So, unfortunately, Philly does still lead the division. They hold the tiebreaker due to conference record. It's like the 4th tiebreaker that I think it goes to. So, Dallas still needs some help here. But yeah. I'm not looking at a site. I'm just going off my memory. What does your standing say? Yes. Well, head to head, they beat us, we beat them. So they're tied, right? Then it goes to divisional. Yeah, but that's probably just, I assume that's why NFL Jesus has it, but my assumption is I'm saying Dallas beats Washington one more time, and then the Eagles are going to beat the Giants twice. So once that happens, they're tied. That your website's not technically wrong because we are 4-1, they're 3-1, so that would give us the edge. But I've been thinking ahead for weeks now at this point with this tiebreaker thing. So I'm assuming because they play the Giants the third to last week and then the last week, I think they're going to beat the Giants twice. Like I'm hoping the Giants can beat them, but I think they beat the Giants twice. So then if we tie there, then it goes to common opponents, I think. And we beat the Jets. They lost to the Jets, but we lost to the Cardinals. They're they play the Cardinals at the end of the season in between the Giants games. So if the Cardinals beat them, that's great for us because then we win that tiebreaker. But once again, I'm assuming they're going to beat the Cardinals. So then we're all tied there because we beat each other. We both lost to the Niners, the Jets and Cardinals losses. We also have the tougher road. We have to play the Bills and the Dolphins, who they already beat. So we have to beat them in order to win, to keep that tied / win it. So let's say hypothetically both teams win out the rest of the year. Those things are all tied. Then it comes down to conference record, which is where the Cardinals loss screws us because they lost to the Jets, who are an AFC team, meaning they only lost twice in the NFC, to Dallas and to San Francisco, to where all three of our losses are NFC, Dallas, Philly, San Francisco, and Arizona. So that would be the ultimate tiebreaker as of right now that would lean Philadelphia's way. So, yes. I have recited this so many times because so many people are like, like I talked to my friends, coworkers, all this stuff. And yeah.
Monday night games. Let's start with mine since it technically ended first, as it was the New York Giants, Tommy DeVito, and all of that. They get the win over my Packers, 24-22. A late field goal drive to win it at the end. From just in regards to my Packers, I'll just go first. We see, as with any young team, because this is a young team, one of the youngest teams in the league, especially on offense, just mistakes, turnovers, especially to start the game, miscues, some drop balls, some passes that were almost caught, but, they just didn't quite bring them in. And, especially no Christian Watson, too, so that limits, the explosiveness of the offense. Once again, it's the NFL. So once you make a couple mistakes, I don't care who you are, it's going to be a tough day. And the Giants, especially with Tommy DeVito, didn't like to roll on fire 17 for 21 for 158, but efficient, didn't turn the ball over. And when they did get those turnovers, they punched them in for scores. And just managed the game very well. Kudos to him and the Giants on both sides. It was very much like last year of how the Giants played in regards to, hey, we'll do we do on offense. We're not afraid to matriculate, be patient on for our time on offense. Maybe make a few splash plays here and there, and then defense. Hey, can you create a turnover or two to tilt the scales in our favor? Since we're not gonna try to since we're not gonna make any mistakes, and that occurred. And Giants got the gritty win, and it happens with a young team in regards to these type of games where. Hey, maybe you miss a veteran presence like Rodgers. Not saying, would have been much different, but hey, what I feared happened. Giants kind of have our number. But what were your thoughts here in regards to this one?
I don't have too many, to be honest. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch this game. I was busy during both Monday nights, so I did have them on the side screen. But yeah, I don't know. I agree with the Packers are a young team. Like. I honestly, when I saw the result, I felt a little disappointed because I felt like the Packers were really gonna catch their stride and all this kind of stuff. And then I even kind of stopped myself after I was thinking that because I realized man, Aaron Rodgers isn't here anymore. And when he was here, he's not there anymore. I'm not a Packers fan, so here felt weird. But he's not there anymore. And when he was, that happened, right? There was the whole we'll run the table season. There was times where that happened, and it became almost normal for the Packers that they were one of those teams that it's all right, we don't have to worry about a bad start to the season because they can make these big long stretches of win streaks. And I was kind of applying that same logic to this team without realizing man, this is a dramatically different team. Sure, there's still some holdovers like Bakhtiari and these guys, but I mean, even just in the receiver core and the guys that are making these kind of plays, we're talking Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, Malik Heath, Tucker Kraft. These guys have all been on the team for 2 years or less. So this is a crazy young team. And yeah, I think overall these kind of results are going to happen for this kind of a team, and I think that if there was anyone who's having the same thoughts that I was of this was very disappointing, and obviously it was because of the result, and the Packers felt like a superior team, but at the same time the Giants, they've had a good defense. Honestly, since Tommy DeVito has taken over the offense, and I'm not saying this is credit to Tommy DeVito, but maybe it's the health of Saquon Barkley. Maybe it's the emergence of Wanda Robinson after he came back from injury. Maybe I don't know what it is, but the offense has just been simply flat out better the last month or so for the Giants. But overall, yeah, like the Giants managed to get it done. It sucks for the Packers. It is a sucky result because they lost, and it felt like, man, they could have maybe potentially been in a better spot for the wild card round. But like I said, when you look at the team on paper and you realize how young a lot of these people are, and this is not the Packers that were previously making these kind of deep runs, then it becomes a little less surprising.
Yeah, and especially once again, not like just the last point, even on defense, like no Jair still, so not even a lot of veteran presence there in regards to solidarity there. So tough loss. It was a loss I feared would happen. Just weird things happen in New York for us, and Giants just feel like one of those teams, like the Niners for us, and I'm sure for you too. The Niners the same, but where just they have our number. Right now, like at least.
Well, they need I really wish that they would have given us the keys to whatever the hell was going on, because you guys had our number. So at least under Rodgers.
Yeah, but then we Eli, except for the the boat thing. We really never got the best of Eli.
The boat thing.
I don't know. I'm not blaming the boat thing, but that's the only reference point I can make to people. People remember the boat game. Apparently,
people know that after that boat picture, the Giants were never the same.
So, yeah. Anyhow, we'll see. Obviously, Mr. DeVito and that fam, that they're going to be kings for quite a while at this city. Even who knows? Maybe even obviously maybe going to next year, because maybe they just keep him around for the vibes and such until Danny Dimes is fully healthy, and they just ride the meme / the wave, because he wins are not quarterback stat, but yeah, he hasn't been terrible. We've seen a little worse, Tim Boyle. Sorry, Tim, to throw another rock at you, but I mean, yeah, we've seen worse in terms of filling guys thus far. But anyhow, let's get on over to the final and but not least Monday night game. I poo-pooed the whole doubleheader. It turned out to be, I was wrong, because 2 exciting games, although it was kind of saved by some crazy fourth quarters. So good job, scriptwriters there. But nonetheless, it is the Tennessee Titans getting the win over the Miami Dolphins. I blame myself for this, because I'm sure, as you may have seen afterwards, once the Raheem Mostert ran in that touchdown with 4 minutes left, saw the Dolphins are up. I texted you initially when they were up 7 in the fourth. I was like, because obviously I put a lot of our money, or fake money, on the Dolphins to cover that 13.5 point spread. So I was sweating a little bit, but I was like, okay, maybe 5 minutes, maybe a pick six happens, and then oh my gosh, the Dolphins get the ball back and they score a touchdown. So I was like, oh, 14, perfect. There's no way Tennessee, like, okay, if they, I was still sweating maybe the field goal or a potential touchdown, cover time touchdown, but hey, I, like many, suspect the Dolphins had it in the bag. I was wrong, as the Titans scored 2 touchdowns in the final 2 minutes and 40 seconds, or 3 minutes or whatever, to win this game over the Miami Dolphins in Miami. Before this point, it was only Miami and your Dallas Cowboys that were undefeated at home, but now it's just your Cowboys, as obviously the Dolphins dropped this one. So yeah, what were your thoughts on the Titans squeaking one out?
I cannot believe this result. I mean, not only did they score 2 touchdowns, they also got a 2-point conversion that they converted. So I don't know. Once again, like I said, I didn't get to really watch any of these games, especially because they were happening at the same time. So I was on my TV. I think I had Packers Giants, honestly. So I don't think I saw any of this game, because I expected it to kind of be a blowout. And when I just look at the box score, I mean, like, penalty yards was the same, but Titans had more penalties, but the yards were basically the same. The Titans had 3 turnovers to Miami's 1. They both attempted 13 third down conversions. The Titans converted 5 to Miami's 4. So I mean, that's largely the same. Like, I don't know, everything feels like the same or worse. Like, Miami had the ball 5 more minutes and somehow Miami lost. Like, walk me through what happened here, because even like one of those 3 turnovers for Tennessee resulted in a touchdown. Like, what? I don't know if you watched this one because your Packers are playing at the same time, but I'm kind of shocked that Miami did not come out with a win.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was just what's getting me in regards to my eyes. I had to watch this on the condensed replay, at least until the fourth quarter, because my game ended right. Like, well, this game had like a couple of minutes left when the Packer game ended.
Yeah.
So I saw the last bits live. But obviously Tyreek apparently was in and out dealing with an injury. And
I did see that.
We obviously see that affects their team because we talk about with some other teams. Now you lose your number one receiver. Now all of a sudden Jalen Waddle kind of has to be the number one guy. And then, Cedric Wilson now is number two. And I think we kind of saw, okay, once again, this kind of solidifies, I feel like reinforces the push for Tyreek for MVP because we see, like he's not 100%. He's not out there for a majority of the snaps. Like Dolphin offense struggled. Like you mentioned, it was a lot. It was up until the fourth quarter, the 2 touchdown runs, like they really weren't able to get much going and could be extremely reliant on those Titan turnovers. I mean, the run game was still solid enough for them. But as we saw, like also, yes, they lost some offensive linemen because I know that there are meeting Miami fans saying, "Oh, we lost left tackle in our center." Like, hey, yes, that's unfortunate, but it happens. And one of our concerns about Tua was, okay, when the play on paper breaks down, can you make a play on your own? And maybe when you lose your left tackle too, part of the whole play on paper, like can you do stuff outside the pocket? And we think we started to see, it wasn't really able to. And once again, like, it's not like this Titans defense is world beaters. They have some talent, but they're not. They're not elite or top tier, I would say. And they were able to get after him, make life tough on the Dolphins offense, and never really got that going. Found their spark because even, I mean, like I say, I think let me double check. Pretty sure both those touchdowns that Poster had were off. One was off a fumble because Will Levis fumbled and they only had to go 12 yards, and then the other one was off a muffed punt. So literally, you kind of see like, yes, the numbers look efficient for Tua, and he didn't really turn the ball over, but took some sacks, and Titans were able to kind of just keep everything in front of them due to, you can say probably due to the fact that Tyreek Hill wasn't much of a factor since he wasn't on the field as much. So, because I mean, you mentioned box wise, Titans didn't really do much, especially running the ball. I mean, and then outside of some chunk plays from Hopkins and Spears towards the end, it was an inefficient night, as you can kind of see. Levis, 23 for 30, not the sexiest completion percentage, but made enough plays at the end to get them in winning position. So, maybe hey, I know Tennessee won't make the playoffs, but hey, at least maybe Will Levis is looking like he can be a thing. He's looking good, not perfect. He obviously has some mistakes, but I think that was to be expected when he came out. It's a little bit raw and aggressive decision making. But hey, I mean, D Hop's doing well. Chiggy Okonkwo's, he had a solid year last year, and he's starting to kind of put up some numbers here. So maybe if you can start getting him get a few more weapons around them, we'll see how many years Derrick Henry has left. Maybe Tyjae Spears can kind of help offset that and kind of switch roles.
I'm hoping they just let Derrick Henry go.
Yeah. So regardless, and we know they're going to be a tough-nosed team come next year. Unfortunately, this year got off to a slow start, so maybe they can keep building going forward. I'm sorry, also Tua did lose a fumble, so he did have a turnover technically. So tough loss for the Dolphins at home, but a little bit of wake up call for them. As I think, if I remember correctly, they have the Jets. They have the Jets next week, Cowboys the week after, Ravens at Baltimore on New Year's Eve, and then Bills. So their stretch is tough, and they did lose their center, former Cowboy Connor Williams, out for the rest of the year. So that obviously hurt them. But like we said, injuries happen. It's very unfortunate. Injuries happen to all teams. So we'll see if they can, if they can.
All I'm going to say is that I would not be shocked if the Dolphins lost all 5, including this Titans game. They went 0-5. I'm not going to say they will.
Yeah.
But we've seen this in the Mike McDaniel era. We've seen this with Tua, that the Dolphins are not that great late in the season. The weather changes. They don't have that heat advantage anymore. Maybe they have to travel to Buffalo or some of these other teams where it's cold. Against Dallas, they don't have to do that. They're playing at home, but I don't know about the Jets game.
Playing at home against Ravens is the only road game.
Okay.
So it is a little bit favorable in that regard.
So that's nice, but still, like I said, I don't know. We've seen the Dolphins, at least schematically too. Teams kind of start to figure them out. This Tyreek injury, if this is a problem, this could maybe slow him down. I don't know. All I'm saying is it's definitely something to keep our eyes on, especially considering that schedule, because that is a brutal end of the season for the Dolphins.
Especially the next three in regards to, hey, you have questions about their offensive line, like Jets. We know that defense is good. We know that front four is good and deep too. They have good depth there. We know the Cowboys get after it, especially in regards to that. So I feel like that's that on Christmas Eve. And then even the Ravens, we mentioned literally top 3 defense, definitely top 2 probably in the league, and they find creative ways to generate pressure already. So and I mean they still took, barring that collapse by their defense last year. I know it's last year, but they hung tough with the Dolphins last year, so they already have familiarity with them. And then obviously the Bills, of course, do, and we'll see.
And I mean, the Bills like smacked them around when they played them earlier this year. So,
so who knows? The Bills may have their number, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, important to check on the health of Tyreek Hill because, like you mentioned, he's that could be a huge factor too in regards to their success going forward because he's been dinged up throughout the season. So it starts to add up for anybody. So another wacky week. Like I mentioned, quite a few upsets this week, and we'll update the standings and money wise next week or next episode in regards to that. We make our picks. I think money wise, you may have done better than I haven't done the math, but the whole losing 500 on Miami was really tough. But we'll see. I think though, record wise, I feel like actually,
I had a real rough week. I think.
But you did get a few different. I would say I started off okay. We'll see because there was a stretch where I had the difference advantage, but towards the end of the day, I don't know. Regardless,
the Cowboys game was good for me.
Buffalo
game,
good. Cincy,
the Tampa game, but so I don't know. I didn't do the math. I just remember to start it. I was like,
it was pretty bad. The morning, the early Sunday slate did not do.
Yeah, I was sitting there thinking like, man, like. I took Jacksonville. I took Detroit. I took Houston. I took Carolina. I took Baltimore. I was sitting there like, dude, this is rough. And so I don't know what the record thing was, but anyway,
I'll calculate it. We'll update people next time. This one's running a little bit late, anyways, time wise. So as always, feel free to rate, review, comments. We'll be back to make our Week 15 picks later in the week, and.